Establishing service connection, this is really important stuff. It's like the building block of any other claim before the VA.
That's right. And then the next thing is, of course, if it's chronic, it means it's still continuing, and you have to show proof that you still have the problem, whether it be residuals of a broken bone that's never properly healed for whatever the reasons might be,
So Glenn,
because you had a crushed bone or something like that.
Okay, so I'm a flyboy. I'm working on a flapjack screw under a C5, and I fall off the flight stand, and I bruise my leg. Okay, I hit the handrail on the way down, and I get a deep bruise, a contusion, and it resolves within a month, month and a half. Is that service connectable?
No. Again, chronicity. It's gotta be continuing problem.
What if that same scenario, but I fractured my femur? Now it's going to heal, but it's still service connected.
That's correct. And
it's only going to be 0% unless there's some underlying or overlying issue that continues to be a problem.
Exactly. Just what I was going to say. It may end up just being 0%, but 0% entitles you to priority medical treatment for at least that disability from the VA, even if you don't qualify under their other eligibility rules for medical care. So it's all tied in. This service connection is tied in very deeply with eligibility for medical care.
And you want to get that VA eligibility for medical care.
Oh, absolutely. And so we've gotten the event occurs on active duty. It's chronic, as shown by a current diagnosis of the problem, whatever it may be. Then you need a connection, a nexus it's called in the legal terms. And the normal way to get that is to have your current doctor say that the current problem is connected back to the problem you experienced on active duty. The best way, the most powerful way, is if you have a copy of your service treatment records and you show them to your current doctor, and he says, after a review of your current medical or your service treatment records, it's my opinion that your XYZ problem today is connected back to the problem that you experienced on active duty. And the standard of proof here is as low as you can go in legal circles, and it's 50-50.
At least as likely as not.
That's right. That's the terminology. So pay attention to those words, as least as likely as not.
However, what Glenn said is really powerful because it's indisputable. If your medical provider, your care provider, needs to be somebody in the professional ranks, a doctor of osteopathy. Yes. Chiropractors they are professionals and they can help substantiate claims. Certainly an MD, as you said, Glenn, reviewing your service medical record and seeing that you had that fractured femur, for instance.
Exactly.
Or let's say somebody has only done 4 years and they're out, but before they got out they developed hypertension and they're on medication. What happens?
Yeah, well, that would be up for service connection, and then so you go through the same process. You get your doctor today to show what the hypertension is, and of course we want that doctor to show how severe it is today. In other words, what are your last 3 blood pressure readings? That's kind of what the VA goes by in rating, or establishing service connection, because hypertension is normally 10%. So.
Right. If you're on medication, the idea is if you leave service, even after one tour, one enlistment. 4 years, and you are now taking medication you're going to take for the rest of your life. Maybe it's a thyroid issue. Whatever it is, if it had onset during your active service,
and you proof in your records.
Yep. Yeah, that's the important point. Now, within a year after leaving service, there's certain built-in factors that the VA will consider, but just bear in mind, if you're worse off when you leave service than when you got your enlistment, then you're going to find service connection available to you.
Good way to put it.
And that's through the direct way.
That's the direct way.
There's other ways.
Oh, there's other ways, and one other way, even the VA struggles with this one at least as much as trying to figure out what percent to assign if they approve service connection under this method, and that's aggravation. Aggravation is your easiest example is your entrance military medical exam shows you got some kind of problem, but they go ahead and let you come on active duty anyway. They say that that's not going to disqualify you from serving on active duty and being worldwide qualified and all those kind of things. You have to be on active duty. And the rigors of active duty worsen that disability that you had, that minor disability usually, that you had when you first came on active duty. And that's called aggravation. And you can get service connection through the process of aggravation, and it's based on the fact that the rigors of active duty have worsened.
Made it worse.
Made it worse. Yeah, worsened is not really a word, I guess.
Oh, I think it probably is. But the object there is, let's say somebody came, as an example, somebody came into the service and they'd had, let's say they're a young man or woman, and they'd had chronic ankle sprains running track in high school. But at the time that they took their entry physical, the doctor may have noted, okay, subject says they have chronic ankle sprains.
History of, yeah.
That's it right there, history of. Now, when they get into service, even though it's a part of their record, because it's on that entry exam, as you mentioned, if they really mess it up, they would consider that an aggravation, and that could be service connectable.
Yeah, I mean, and that could happen as early as basic training. Basic training is pretty tough duty.
For sure.
Especially for some kind of a problem like an ankle condition or any kind of musculoskeletal condition that you might have had previously that possibly continues. Then, as I said, the VA struggles with the percentage. First, they have to make two decisions. First decision is this service connected through the process of aggravation? And then if they say yes, then they have to figure out what percent is it, and then they have to make just sort of a guesstimate as to how disabling it was when you entered active duty versus how disabling it is now. And if they say it was 10% disabling when you entered active duty, of course, you probably shouldn't have come on active duty if it was 10% disabling.
Sure.
And they say it's 30% disabling now, they subtract the 10 from the 30 and pay the 20.
So your evaluation.
And they really struggle with that because you're guesstimating how bad it was when you entered on active duty.
Exactly, but the object lesson there is don't be fearful of filing a claim if you had a condition that is even on your entry physical if it was made worse during your active service.
Absolutely.
Now there's this third one that we talk about, we've spoken about many times before, but it really bears mentioning again.
Yeah, and that's the presumptives, and we talked at length about the Agent Orange presumptives last week if you were tuned in to us. And, of course, if you're not, you can always go online and
avetproject.org.
Yep, and tune in from there and pick up.
That's right.
We're getting those categorized for you by subject, so it's going to be even easier to pick out which one to listen to.
Exactly. You can go to 1300wmel.com. and look on our archived shows. Mm-hmm. Our engineer is going to actually title these so you'll be able to refer to them in the future so that you can directly go to that subject matter that's going to be applying to your situation. And the presumptives, we'll see if we can get that labeled because it's a really big issue. But describe a little about this whole presumptive business again.
Okay, well, presumptives are kind of like what I call no-brainers. If for instance, you are unfortunately afflicted with lung cancer and you had boots on the ground in Vietnam and were exposed, well, that presumes that you were exposed to Agent Orange. You no longer have to prove that you were exposed to it. Then you file the claim for service connection for lung cancer and the VA will, no-brainer, approve it. Then it's just a question of how serious is it today as to what percentage they assign to it. Now, what we haven't covered in the past is this presumptive also can apply to radiation claims. Not a lot of those military members running around anymore that participated in the test or occupied the Japanese cities where the atomic bomb was dropped.
But there may be a few.
There may be a few. And then there are certain people who continue to be radiation exposed by the nature of their job. People who handle nuclear munitions, people who work as an X-ray technician and so forth.
Yeah, the folks that are running the engines on these massive supercarriers and
Good point, yeah.
You just don't know. If you have some risk of radiation exposure and you're listening to American Warrior Radio, you could have a presumptive service-connected disability claim.
That's right. And it reminds me that my brother-in-law died from cancer of the brain, and we ended up getting his surviving spouse dependents indemnity compensation because he worked on the nuclear reactors all his life in the submarine. So.
See, so you just don't know, and that's why it's so important to listen here and to consult a credentialed veteran service rep. Let me throw in there that the VA's new secretary, Department of Veterans Affairs Shinseki, has opened the presumptive door for our currently serving vets after 9/11 due to environmental toxins over in theater Iraq and Afghanistan, because the locals, anything that's combustible, they will burn, whether it's to heat their homes or to cook on, I don't know. But our troops, our brave men and women over there who have volunteered to serve and protect this country, are inhaling this. They're practically ingesting it. It's covering their skins, getting in their eye. So respiratory, skin, eye disorders, anything that may result from being exposed to the environmental toxins in the air over there in theater, Shinseki has opened the door. And keep in mind, they're still adding to the list of Vietnam presumptives due to Agent Orange 35 some years later. And for Shinseki to do this at this point in time, I give him a big pat on the back for that.
Yeah, and I give him a big pat on the back for many things. He's really
very active.
Changed the course of that big super tanker, and that's no small feat to do that.
Yeah, so we don't want to sit here and hammer on the VA, because there are some good things that are happening, and certainly they've got a true leader. I think he's a 4-star Army general, wasn't he?
Yeah, retired 4-star Army general. Sure
Go
is.
Army. Go Army.
And he's a Vietnam vet also on top of that.
Fantastic. We need some good leaders up there, and I applaud Shinseki for the work he's done. Okay, so that last one that we need to talk about regarding service connection, well, there's two more. But
there's two more. One of them's kind of often never land. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the other one is, and I alluded to this earlier in the show, and that's secondary. And that's if you have you encounter and become afflicted with something. Usually these are disease processes more, but not always. It can be a musculoskeletal type issue. That if your service-connected disability causes you to have another disability, then that other disability can also be service-connected on a secondary basis because it was caused by your service-connected disability. In other words, you wouldn't have had the service-connected disability unless it was for your military service, and if it causes you another disability, then that's going to be service-connected also. Give them an example.
A good example would be one of our brave warriors loses a leg over there and he's wheelchair-bound. If he later develops some sort of heart condition, cardiac disorder, it's very, very likely going to be related to the amputation. That's just the course of events, and that's medically accepted. So anything that happened in service that caused you a chronic disorder that leads to something else happening, your body further breaking down, that's what we're calling secondarily service-connected.
That's right. And, a real common one for the Vietnam-era folks is who become afflicted with diabetes mellitus type 2, which is a presumptive, no-brainer service connection, is either diabetic retinopathy, which is a loss of vision due to the diabetes, or kidney problems due to the diabetes, and others.
Peripheral
diabetes
neuropathies.
Is a pretty
the
nasty
peripheral
disease.
Neuropathies, anything diabetes can start eating your whole body up.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're service connected for those diabetes, secondary to boots on the ground in Vietnam.
That's right.
These are secondarily service connected. Okay, the last one we may as well touch on since we brought it up.
Yeah, it's commonly called an 1151 claim. That's because that's the part of the code, not the code, that's the part of the United States Code, which is the law, and it's section 1151 under Title 38. And it basically says that if the VA causes you a disability due to medical treatment, that disability can be approved as if it were service-connected.
So for payment purposes and treatment, but not all the other ancillary benefits that come with actual active duty service.
That's right, and it's not as easy as it sounds.
No, it isn't.
If you go in to have 2 fingers amputated because of your diabetes that's caused that problem to result in that need, and they take off those 2 fingers, that doesn't mean you now get a disability for missing 2 fingers, because the first thing they look at is that informed consent form that you sign, and if on there it's going to say this is going to result in the loss of 2 fingers. It may say this is going to result in your death, or it may result in some other kinds of problems due to the surgery. If any of those things are listed on your informed consent thing, and the VA looks and sees that, that's not going to be subject to 1151. It has to be due to a medical mistake.
That's a good way of putting it. It's plain and simple. It has to be some negligence or error on the part of the VA during the treatment, and that is potentially service-connected disability. At least it's treated in that way.
It's treated as if it were service-connected, and you do get paid for it, as Garren said.
So we've touched on a lot here today, folks, a whole lot. I want to mention a few